in our last session, we ended actually with an acknowledgement that on this very day, at this very moment, the sentencing hearing for Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd, is happening. And so it's a great honor for me to have youth here to talk about how they have intervened in the aftermath to create ways of thinking otherwise and responding that we probably don't see as much as we should in the mainstream media coverage of this event and ongoing aftermath. So very excited to have young people with us here today and to have one of the most impactful youth engagement leaders I have ever met, Marika Pfefferkorn, to be leading this panel and serving as moderator. So let me introduce Marika Pfefferkorn. Marika Pfefferkorn, I would say, is a force of nature and a force for good. She is one of the first community leaders that I worked with here in the Twin Cities when I moved to Minnesota from Michigan. And I'm so glad that I met her. I met her working towards changing the policies around school suspensions, which we know are so warped by implicit bias and racism. She was working with the Solutions Not Suspensions Coalition, which many Humphrey students have also worked with here in the Twin Cities, centering the voices and ideas and actions of youth in changing the way we think about schools and the way that students feel in schools and how they are treated in schools, and connecting all of that to the racial disparities we see, not only in the so-called school to prison pipeline, but also disparities in jobs, housing, and other facets of education. So she has helped many people think differently and transformatively, not only about how to close Minnesota's so-called achievement gap, but also how to make schools sites of transformational change, healing, and youth agency. Marika works along the continuum from community to theory to practice, integrating collective cultural wisdom and applying a restorative lens to upend punitive conditions in education and to reimagine education through a liberatory lens. She has successfully co-led campaigns to end discriminatory suspension practices in Minnesota schools, to remove the presence of police in Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools, and to increase investment in Indigenous restorative practices in educational and community settings. She is currently supporting Inequality in helping education and criminal justice systems provide quality and continuous education for justice-involved youth during COVID-19. She is one of the co-creators of the Data for Public Good campaign, which works with and in community to think about the ways that data shape and shift the way we address climate change, education, racism, policy, and governance. Data for Public Good is a movement that calls for community-defined shared leadership, vision, and responsibility for the values and outcomes that we want our data to drive. So linking to our last presenter, Henrik, talking about how technology is a tool, but how we use it really matters. What values guide that, and whose values and which members of the community help guide how we make these decisions is really important. And Marika has always been a voice for making sure youth voice is part of designing their own future. So I'm so pleased to have her here today to introduce the youth she's been working with in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, to talk about the way they are responding and imagining a different future. Thank you so much, Marika, for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Squires. What a generous description and bio that you've given me. I really appreciate all of the years that you have supported that work as well. But I am excited to be here today with what I will call not exceptional youth. Youth are everywhere trying to do amazing things in this world, and we often don't recognize them as just being young people. You don't have to be exceptional, but this is a group of young people that have been very committed and dedicated to making change. And I want to give you a little backdrop about how the youth led response to the murder of George Floyd originated. And so last year, around the time of the murder of George Floyd, community members, we were looking around and noticing that in the media, in a lot of places, that young people's voice wasn't front and center or present. And I heard a lot of young people saying that their teachers were not talking about what was going on, their families were not talking about what was going on. And so we really wanted to create a space to amplify the voices of young people and to set their agency free in how they wanted to respond to the murder of George Floyd. And so that was the birth of the murder of George Floyd. And it actually started as a crowdsourcing program that has lifted, and we are now in our second cohort, and we now have youth initiatives for justice, which many of our original youth-led response to the murder of George Floyd members are still in the program today. But today you have a sampling of young people that have been organizing for change in the communities across the Twin Cities. We have folks in our program from Coon Rapids, Brooklyn Park, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Cottage Grove, Roseville, Eagan. And so, again, this is also a cross region program where young Black identifying young people get to connect and advance justice in our community. So I want to let them introduce you to you from their own words in their own voice. And so the way that we usually open up and share about ourselves is we ask this question: who you be, what gives you life, and what do the people that we're here with today need to know about you? And as a reminder, please let us all know your grade and your school that you attend. Um, and just let folks get a sense of who you are before we jump into the questions for the panel. So I will start with Rebecca. Rebecca, would you mind going first, introducing yourself?
I would love to. Thank you so much for the introduction. I am Rebecca Oyebanji. I am Nigerian. I go to public school and I'm going to be a junior this upcoming fall. I am repping youth-led response to the murder of George Floyd, also known as Power to the People. And what gives me life is being able to gather in spaces like this and have meaningful conversations with my fellow peers and adults and see beautiful faces every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Um, Naomi, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Naomi McConan. I am 18. I'm from St. Paul. And just like the rest of the members here, I am an active participant in the youth initiatives for justice. Something that gives me life is my family and the future. The potential success that comes in the future is what gives me life. And something you would need to know is that I'm Eritrean American.
Thank you, Naomi. Nia Imani, would you go next, please?
Sure. I'm Nia Imani Tolfree. I am also a member of the Youth Initiatives for Justice. And what gives me life is my family and friends. Something that you all need to know about me is I'm hardworking and I'm independent. And I'm 16 and I'm going to be a junior this fall. And a pandemic survival tip I have is self-care. This is the time to do it.
Thank you, Nia. And finally, we have Renee. Would you like to introduce yourself now?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Renee Bonet Jet. I am now a coach with the Youth Initiatives for Justice, but I was previously a member of the youth-led response to the murder of George Floyd cohort. What you need to know about me is I'm 22. I graduated with my BA in 2019, so I'm no longer in school, but I really love working with the youth that I'm very honored to be working with now and continuing to work with Marika. And one pandemic survival tip I have for students everywhere is don't stay stuck inside, or don't let your schedule keep you in the house. You know, decide to do work at the library one day, or the community center the next, or maybe a park with Wi-Fi. another day, just so you don't become a, a crab in a shell.
No, we do not want crabs and shells. Thank you. Thank you, Renee. And so, what I will say is this is a youth panel, and we invite you to relax, sit back if you need to, take your shoes off. It is okay to bring water and beverages on camera. Take a sip if you need it. We want everybody to feel comfortable and welcome to this space. So that includes you as well, panelists. But why don't we just jump in? And so, one of the things that we did is in a youth-led response, it really is about adults being available to provide guidance and support, and young people are opening and expanding their ideas about what they want to pursue without limitations. And so this group, the youth-led response to the murder of George Floyd, we actually had a group that focused on an intergenerational podcast. We had a group that was addressing school climate in education. We had a group that wrote a book. Story tells a story about organizing. And we had a group that created a platform to make more accessible Black literature and film to their teaching staff and their teams at schools. And so each of these groups had an opportunity to work with new people that they had not connected with from across the region, and to do a project from front to end. And also in the process, learn about social media, also learn about grant writing. Each of the projects were given a grant to pursue and support their effort. And so it showed up in many different ways, whether it was an event or a published book. So I'm going to invite our panelists to share with us a little more about their experience. And so I'm just going to ask you to answer the question, why did you choose this project, and what are some of the challenges, surprises, and lessons that you navigated over the course of that, I believe it was a 6-month cohort? And why don't we start with school climate? So that's both Rebecca and Nia. And you all can work with each other and sharing the answers to that question as you please.
I can start. So an overview of our project, we did a youth roundtable talking about school climate and the experiences young people of color face and the similarities between our experiences and what we feel like school environment feels like to us. And we made a slideshow presentation focusing on relationships between teachers and students of color, the school to prison pipeline, and how teachers can be more relational. And I'll pass it to Rebecca.
Thank you, Nia. And she really summed it up about what our project was. We really had time to communicate with our peers and have like a conversation about how they feel in the spaces that they are in school, and like what can we do that, like what kind of conversations can we have that will change others' perspectives on how we feel, and like conversations to actually find out how to change that, and what process we need to do to change it. And during that time, I gained a lot of knowledge, and I got more relational with people and found a different perspectives based on what they said and what they brought up in the meeting. Yeah.
And I just want to remind the audience that this is young people that are in school during a pandemic following the murder of George Floyd. And so, what a lot of things that were happening in real time were interactions on social media between students, still connected to school, but happening on social media. So, when we're talking about school climate extends far beyond the classroom. And so, that's some of the conversations that they were having. One of the other things I just wanted to share is that as a part of the project, again, broadening experiences and perspectives, we partnered with a youth serving group in North Carolina to have a conversation like, how are you all navigating this stuff? And so, if the two of you would talk a little bit more about the process of you all working together to get to consensus about how you were going to do this whole climate?
So the way we got to consensus was figuring out who we wanted to reach out to, who we wanted in the conversation, and what they can bring to us about ways we can change the environment in schools and beyond that, and just knowing how where we're reaching and how far it's going to reach and how to continue to reach that level of people and things like that.
Yeah, same thing Rebecca said. I think one day we were just talking about how much school affects our lives, and especially when we're going through racialized traumas and harm, and we're expected to be in class all the time and be okay and be at 100%. We were just talking about how it feels, and we were like, oh, this would be a good conversation to have amongst students of color throughout Minnesota. So yeah.
And the conversation is continuing. Thank you. I'm going to transition a bit so we can share more of the other projects and the work that occurred. And so I'm going to ask that Naomi describe the project that you worked on with Lydia, and how did it come into being? Where is it at? And what are some of the challenges, surprises, and lessons that you've learned along the way, Naomi?
Yeah, so me and Lydia created a website which is called Archives of Black Minds. And essentially it promotes and it's just a catalog of Black literature and different Black books and blogs of what we recommend or what we would like to advertise to people who don't have access or don't have like that interest to really go beyond looking for, you know, well-known Black books, but really want to like dive into um, the underrated ones. And so the challenges would have to be that our end product was completely different from our vision, which was completely okay, but it was discouraging in the during the process because we didn't know if this was even a great idea or how we should have gone about it. Um, and I think the biggest surprise that we both learned was that there's so much of Black literature to be exposed. And we are so blessed that we had the opportunity and the outlet from this program to do so.
And would you say more about how this black lit and film connects to the murder of George Floyd?
hmm It has to do with the Black experience. Um, and if you cannot feel it, you can read about it, you can hear about it. Um, and so we just believe that books and film are the best way to convey those experiences.
Thank you, Naomi. I think that is a perfect transition for Renee, because not only do we have an effort to publish existing works, but it's also about creating and making space for our voices. And so, Renee, please tell us about the story about a story. And how you came to get your project off the ground, how you land on it, and the things you've learned along the way.
Absolutely. So I initially wanted to make a children's book because I'm really passionate about liberating Black youth from our education system, specifically when they don't teach our histories correctly or fully and with full personhood. And so I created this children's book to start the demand for um, literature, for curriculums that are geared towards Black history specifically and that liberate our narratives and our communities. Um, some of the challenges that came with that is not knowing how people were going to respond, right? Nia said it really well. Our youth were not being engaged in the realities um, that were affecting our community in real time. And they were expected to show up to classes without bringing the changes that's happening in their neighborhood into the classroom. And they were expected to still be fully participating students. And I didn't think that was appropriate. And so I wanted to create something that could anchor the conversation for educators and for families, in engaging youth about the changes that they're seeing in their neighborhoods and in the conversations that they're hearing on the news and in social media.
And the impact of all of your work has really been incredible. I know, Renee, that they have actually adopted this book in the Minneapolis public schools and have created a curriculum around it to support. Because one of the biggest things, Nia always laughs when I ask the question at the beginning of a session. So, how many of your teachers, administrators, staff at school asked you about X current event? And so we always come back to the circle, like, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. Let's get tools, let's get ideas and share. And it's coming directly from people that are experiencing it in real time. Like, there wasn't a tool to talk about the murder of George Floyd at an elementary level and using it all the way up to middle school. And so really it has been about releasing the talents and the gifts of young people and giving them the resources in order to do it, and applying that to also building a peace building approach to the process. So what I want to talk about, again, in the last year, a lot has happened. It has felt like the Twin Cities has been ground central. What has it felt like being young, gifted, and Black in a time like this? What does home, the Twin Cities, feel like now? What progress have we made? What challenges do you still face and experience in your daily lives? And how has living in this period and during this time shaped you? And I know that's a lot of questions, but what I want you to do is just kind of grab on to what resonates with you, and we can come back to it and I can prompt you if you need more, but feel free to answer. I'm not going to give you a direction for who to go first. Whoever feels like they're ready to give the response, we're ready to hear it.
Okay, if it's okay if I'll go first. As for how it feels, I would say it's felt empowering and definitely insightful. And being around everybody and hearing what they have to say and seeing the different perspectives. And as for the progress I think we've made, is making sure that our voices are being heard and finding ways to honor the Black bodies that have been lost, and really finding ways to keep them alive in a way, even though they are gone. And then I would say something that is challenging sometimes is having conversations and continuing those conversations on the unjust system that continues to be of disservice to marginalized communities, such as Black people, and continuing to share awareness on those injustices of Black bodies, as a challenge that I would say. And I think that that's something that I think is a challenge.
I can go next. What has it felt like to be young, gifted, and Black in a time like this? I would say it's been kind of bittersweet. Bitter part, I wake up every day and I wonder if my brothers, my dad, is gonna be okay. Are they gonna come back home? I wonder if me going to the store, trying something on is mistaken for me stealing something. And I say sweet as well because it's made me grow as a person. I wouldn't be who I am today if I wasn't Black. You know, I've had experiences that shape who I am today and how I respond to things and how I portray myself.
I can go next. So similar to Nia, for me, it's been up and down. Um, Up would always have to be the culture and always the engagement of being a Black woman, and the beauty that it comes with. The down would have to be, um, what is everyone else's intention? You know, when it comes to the gifted part, do you want me because of my value, or do you want me because you feel bad for my community and you just want to give me a leg up for those things that have happened, you know, not only years back, but even today. And so a lot of times it just makes me question, what is the intention of many people or many companies? And I think falls into the challenges. And something as well would have to be, just because something so devastating and so impactful happened, such as the murder of George Floyd, it doesn't stop what's going on. And what I mean by that would be gentrification. I live around the Rondo area, and so just seeing new infrastructure around historical Black places and so many immigrant and Black owned businesses, it just makes me very upset, and it falls back into questioning intentions. You know what I mean? And so it has its ups and downs.
Thank you for sharing that, Naomi. I also live in St. Paul. I grew up in the Frogtown area, but I live in East St. Paul right now. So I'm going to try to answer, what does home feel like now, and how has living during this time shaped you, kind of in one answer. Right now, I've never felt so connected, protected, and loved by the people who live in my neighborhood and the people in my community, right? Um, from food banks to holding public Black forums, right? There are so many different ways that we are taking care of each other. Even our actual spaces, our buildings are decorated with affirmations that we matter, affirmations that we are loved, and that we're powerful. And so I feel very communal anytime I step in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Minnesota. The downside of that, I think Naomi said it perfectly, is the blatant gentrification of our neighborhoods. If you drive down University, you can see the opportunistic ways that businesses have been taking over the Midway area. And have been disguising themselves as community partners when really they just want to push us out, when really they support the development and building of apartments apartments that we can't afford, even though I've lived in that community for all of my life. And so I think what surprises me, and I think that what will surprise the city, is how we won't let that happen, and how during this time where we see the manifestations of our strength during these challenging times, we're not going to let gentrification, we're not going to let the city, we're not going to let people who want to push us out of the city and smother our voices do that.
So I think a lot of times when things happen in community, folks want to get through it and brush past it. And the reality is that's not healthy, that's not healing, and that doesn't bring about peace. And so this work, like all of you have said, is really about taking care of self, taking care of community, and thinking about the future. And that is really what you all are demonstrating and participating in this youth-led response and youth initiatives for justice, is pointing in directions that folks may not naturally think about as activism or peace building, but they're both. I want to take a moment to pause and invite the participants that are with us today to join us in an activity. This is something we like to do to get down to the nitty gritty. And so we'd like to play a game of word association. So, what I will do is I will share a word, and our panelists will say the first response that comes to their mind. They will share that out loud. But as participants of this session, we invite you to respond with what comes to mind for you as well. And what we'd like to do at the end is collect all those thoughts, and maybe not during the session, but we can share them with Dr. Squires later, is share the word poetry or the creation of our energy around this word association game. So are you all on board to type your responses into the chat? And if you are able, there's the reaction bar. You can click on that. Let us know you're out there, you're with us, you're ready to participate. And we'll get started. And panelists, this game is not about being the smartest. Remember, not the biggest words. It's just about what comes to your heart. What do you feel in your soul? And let it come out, okay? And quickly. This is rapid fire. This is rapid fire. Are we ready? All right. Please say the first thing that comes to mind when I say peace.
Consent.
Ocean breeze.
Harmony.
Journey.
And you all can stay off mute for the word association game. Next word, empowerment.
Support.
Community.
Everlasting.
Strength.
Future.
Innovation.
Technology.
Unknowing.
Youth.
Accountability.
Responsibility.
Honesty.
Awareness.
Reform.
Joy.
Happiness.
Black.
Harmony.
Contentment.
Justice.
Equity.
Reflection.
Impact.
Now.
Healing.
Progress.
Future.
Necessary.
Community.
All right, y'all have passed word association. I saw some amazing things coming in on the chat. I think we have pooled our collective wisdom and can ride the wave of these words for the remainder of this panel. We're going to transition back to the brilliance of the folks we are sitting here with in this space. I also just want to acknowledge that this is a really full circle moment as we're sitting here, potentially the sentencing of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is happening right now. And in the last year, you all have come full circle in how you're addressing and holding this injustice in community for all of us. So I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on that this is a very powerful experience. And we're hearing that the alert just came in from NPR, so we will continue to acknowledge and note that, and we will transition back really quickly. I want to ask you, we've been talking about the harm, the trauma, agency, and power, but at the core of this work, we really want to have peace. And I really want to talk about peace with you today. So let's do it. What is peace building to you?
I would say an example of peace building would be restorative justice. Restorative justice, because it lets you be in space with others and really engage and be present and evaluate what you're feeling and process through that, whether it's generational hurt or it's hurt that you feel in that current moment, and express that and just be able to solve the conflict that was there. That's what I would say peace building.
I would say peace building is a journey, and it's going to be a continuous journey that youth need to be really centered in. Youth voices need to be uplifted. And I want to give a shout out to Jennifer and the participant in our participant group who's here, who is a youth, who I think would be an amazing leader in the future, and an amazing leader now if she wants to be. And I also want to challenge people to thinking about peace, not as the absence of violence. And yeah, thank you, Jennifer.
I would say peace building is a mindset. I think it shouldn't be temporary. I think we should live or try to strive to live in peace, and in community, and not in a reaction to violence, like Renee said. I just think it's a mindset.
I think peace building has its own principles. And some of the principles I kind of think of would be self-awareness, awareness of others, listening to listen, not listening to respond, and acting upon what needs to be restored. And it's no easy task, but I believe that when you set your differences aside and you have time to really interact and connect as a community, it does everyone justice.
I really appreciate that response. All of them. I too believe that peace building is having a shared meaning of a community and a vision toward that you are working towards, rather than reacting to. So I really appreciate appreciate and the pure joy of being at peace with yourself and the world. Um, I want to turn it back to the programming a bit more. I want to understand how this program has impacted you. I know that you have been able to publish a book, you've been on a number of panels, you've been invited to present. So, what's next for you? This is not a journey that just starts in 6 months and is finished. What's the plan? What's next for you on your justice journeys?
I can start. I'm currently working with two of my peers to create a website that talks about mental health, culture, identity, and harm in schools, all in the school environment. And we're creating the website to give more information about what happens in school, and then also providing resources for kids who don't have the availability to resources like Black mental health therapists, and just people to talk to. And yeah.
Excellent.
I can go next. So my team and I are currently working on our next section or next aspect, which is Black cinema. And we are trying to figure out ways to really kind of like the catalog of books. We're trying to do a catalog of like documentaries and films and all of those sorts. And so what we're trying to look towards is how do we implement it into schools, or how do we get teachers to have access to these so that it fits in with the mission of kind of transitioning the curriculum just a tad bit so that it's inclusive and it's very engaging and you have multiple perspectives.
A question for you, Naomi.
Yes.
If people were just curious about peeking at it, is that website live?
It's live. I'm not gonna lie, it needs to be reconstructed, but it's live. And it's called archivesofblackminds.com.
Say that again, please.
Archivesofblackminds.com.
Oh, wonderful. Look at how it just showed up there in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect.
Next. Did you want to go, Renee?
Yeah, I'll go. So what's next for me? I'm gonna try to get my book in as many schools as I can. So far, I've been working with Minneapolis Public Schools. I've been working with St. Paul libraries. And then I'm in trying to work with a couple of charter schools in the Twin Cities, but I really hope to work with every school district in Minnesota to get this book in the classrooms and into children's hands and to start engaging Black students um, with what's going on in in their communities right now. Also, I am grateful enough to be able to continue to work with Marika as a coach, helping a group, coaching a group of young writers like Rebecca and writing a anthology. So that should be a really fun project that's coming out soon. And then I hope to write a part 2 of Story Tells the Story about organizing. It's going to be called Story Tells a Story About Community. And it's going to be talking about the history of Black community centers in Minnesota. So yes, I'm very excited for what's next.
Renee, did you mention where a person could find that book if they were interested?
Yeah, so my book is available on Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Nobles. Um, I'll also put my um, my webpage in the chat if you're interested in more information about not only my book, but what inspired it.
Perfect. Thank you. Rebecca?
Thank you. So as Renee said, there will be an anthology made, and I will be part of that. It is a pleasure to have Renee as a coach. He is amazing. And really we're just specifically what I will be going forward with in the story is the limitations youth face in school when they aren't really taught about their history or their ancestry. So just telling more and giving more ways that we can fight against that and how we can really just know more about ourselves, because I feel like school is so important that and it's such a big part of our lives that I feel like it should be implemented in our schools, as Renee said. And then yeah, that's pretty much forward. I'm moving forward.
Look at that. Renee is also featured on the Juneteenth page for the University of Minnesota. Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Squires. One of the questions, so these remarkable people also participated in a interview on a podcast called Activism and the Youth-Led Response to the Murder of George Floyd. And so one of the questions that we asked in that piece was, what is a piece of advice that you would give to someone, either a young person who is just stepping into their journey, and also to older people that are looking to support young people that are on this journey? And so, if you can just share some sage words of advice with folks here to get them started or redirected if necessary, on the best way to advance in building this culture of justice and peace.
I would say that not everyone is built to be like in the front lines. I think that a lot of people feel just because they're not in the front lines that they're not doing activist work. I think that there are people who can public speak, do spoken word, poems, and all that stuff, and they feel like they're not doing as much as someone who may be in the front lines protesting. But I think it really depends on what you feel in your heart, and what you feel you're supposed to do with your activism work personally. Um, yeah, I would also say for older people trying to support, I would say um, give us wisdom in our fights because you guys have experienced more things than us. And yeah, that's all I would say.
I think it is also important to know that many of our folks were, as us as all, were working, schooling remotely at home, and so navigating how do you actually think about justice and peace building when you're in isolation, that is also something that you have tackled. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Nia. Who else would like to answer now?
Nia read my mind completely. Um, I just wanted to say that there are so many different ways to be an activist. I mean, we're activists ourselves, but we weren't in the physical forms of that. And so there's different ways to go about it. And I think it's important as mentors and older people in our lives not to just automatically assume that we are going to be on the front lines, as Nia said. And so any encouraging words, and if you can be involved, get involved, and also support the work in any way you can.
Yeah, basically really Naomi and Nia really summed it up. Standing in solidarity with us and just being there to motivate and give words of wisdom and just being there and being present. And then I would say back to what Naomi and Nia said, sometimes you don't have to be in the front lines. Everybody has a purpose, and as long as you can find your purpose, whether it's artistically or spoken word or poems, it's beautiful either way. I feel like just showing that you are there and that you are willing to participate is beautiful already.
Yeah, for youth interested in getting involved, you know your strengths and weaknesses, but we also want you to know that you have profound knowledge as well. And so using whatever medium you communicate in to make a difference in this journey towards justice and freedom and liberation, use your strengths, use your um, artistic mediums, use your voice in whatever way you think would be most valuable in this fight.
Wonderful. I think that is a great place for us to move from our panel to have our participants ask some questions of these wonderful young people who have shared with us their projects today and their viewpoints on peace building. So if you have questions, please put them into the chat and I will look for them. And also while we're waiting, I'm going to ask a question of all of you. Would you like all of our participants, we have people from all over the country and all over the world, far away as Norway, who are here, who have been working in peace building. And since you put it out there in your last response that one of the things that you would like older folks to do is to provide support, words of wisdom, and encouragement, I'm going to invite people to put those words of wisdom and encouragement into the chat, just as we participated in the word association. So in addition to questions that you might have, please put some messages in the chat or put them on the Jamboard for these wonderful presenters who are doing such great work. One thing that I wanted to ask you all about was to sort of connect to some of the panels we had yesterday about art and representation, and all of you are involved in that in different ways. And so one of the questions that came up for the artists who were on our panel and the filmmakers who were on another panel yesterday is the responsibility of the artists, particularly people coming from outside of the community, who may come into the middle of a protest, right, at George Floyd Square, for example, and they just start taking pictures because they want to be in the moment and get a picture and then send it off to their magazine. If someone came into your community or came to one of your meetings wanting to do a profile on you all, what kinds of ways would you direct them to approach you? And what would they need to do to gain your trust? So let's say someone from the Star Tribune or the New York Times or MSNBC said, we want to do a feature on you all. What would be your response in terms of thinking about what their responsibility is to you?
I want to say I was able to be a part of a youth press release not too long ago. It happened over north where a bunch of youth were able to speak to the increased community violence happening in their neighborhood. And after the press conference, a lot of the news reporters went up to youth individually to ask for their statements. And so I think that what's important to remember is that a lot of these events or cohorts, right, they're youth led, but there are still facilitators who are there to support, protect, and promote youth voice, right? So it might be important to first respect the protection that we have over our Black youth by addressing the facilitator and asking, is it appropriate for me to go up to this young person, this adolescent, and ask them a question? Am I in the right by saying that? Can I speak to them? Because you're not automatically just given the right to walk up to these youths in whatever capacity that you want, right? So going up to a Marika and asking, is it okay if I speak to your youth? And then knowing Marika and how great she is, she probably have already established norms in amongst the youth of who's comfortable with speaking with the press conference people and who's not, right? And so I think that's an important thing to consider if you are wanting to approach youth for their ideas and with any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that, Renee. Thank you for that. We've got a bunch of questions coming through. So I'm going to just say out loud the names that I see in the order that I'd like them to speak. Steiner Bryn would like to speak to you on camera. He's going to go first with some words of wisdom. After that, we have Mar who has a question, and I can read that out, or Mar, you can, after Steiner is complete, you can ask your question, and then Patrice. So Steiner, then Mar, and then Patrice.
It's a very easy to remember. T, things take time. We often do the mistake of measuring our action according to the results that we have accomplished. And working for peace, working for the recognition of dignity, the dignity of all human beings, is such a slow process. So we need to somehow measure our action according to what was possible. What was the space of action we had accessible? Did we do our best and not measure it according to how it actually changed society overnight? Because this is generational. And then when we think, wow, a generation, that's a long, long time. But imagine in the Middle East, if we in a generation can make peace, that would be fantastic. Today, we're discussing Afghanistan, and it's been war for a generation. And we want results too fast. We get too impatient, and when we don't see the results, we have a tendency maybe to give up. One village in South Serbia, people said no to even participate in talking for 4 years. And then I just kept coming back, have coffee with them, and you know, not the. And then after 4 years, they said, "Okay, we'll come along." And I said, "Well, what changed your mind? Well, why did you all of a sudden, you know, want?" And they said, "Well, the fact that you never gave up somehow made us curious about the land beyond. Is something going on there?" So TTT, good luck. It was fantastic to listen to you. It was very inspiring. And you should come to Norway and enlighten the youth in my country.
All right, I think we're gonna have to figure that out. We'll have to talk to Gary Smaby and Dean Bloomberg about making that work. I think we're gonna have to do that. All right, next, Mar Valdecantos. I hope I am pronouncing your name at least close to what I should be saying. Would you please come?
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, Marvel de Cantos. I live in Northfield, and my question is about, we have an organization that works with, an advocacy group that works with immigrants, refugees, low-income people in our area. And also we, over a year ago, created the Northfield Anti-Racist Action Coalition. And my question is, how do we engage? Usually these organizations are adults. How do we engage and connect with young people? Because that voice is key to the work moving forward.
I would say try to reach out. I wouldn't have known about the response to George Floyd, Youth Initiatives, Justice, if there wasn't an effort to reach out to me, because, you know, our age, we're kind of just focused on school, getting good grades and stuff. So I would say have an effort to reach out and reach out again and reach out again, and just stay consistent with what you believe in and what the organization stands for. So there's no confusion about what the kids or youth would want to be a part of.
I can speak next. I think why Marika's cohort was so successful, number one, was because we were treated with dignity. Although we are younger, we were never talked down to, and we had so much free space to do as we will, as we could. You know, we were the ones who took initiative of our own projects. We were the ones who decided, should we do this or do that? Versus when you have an adult or a grown person navigating it for you, it kind of makes you feel less of. So I think it's really huge to make sure that there's dignity and that there's respect, and make sure that these young people know that they are very capable of it, because that goes a long way. You will see results.
If I may just add, when we also launched this, it was in the middle of a pandemic and a lot of young people had lost jobs. And so a part of it was paying stipends for folks to participate as they were learning and working. And so I know that's not always a possibility, but what is it that the young people that you want to work with value and need? And how do you bridge that? And also the connection to more resources of grants to actually fund projects they're interested in versus something that you need to fulfill. I think that also goes a long way.
And that really resonates with that reverse RFP idea that Dr. Joy and Dr. Lewis talked about yesterday. For those of you who were not with us, right? The usual direction is a foundation or an agency says, we want to do X project because we think it will help this community. Get youth involved, but you have to do everything we say. And this reverse process that Marika is talking about and the youth here are talking about is trust that folks will use resources in the ways that will benefit them. Get curious and ask them what kinds of resources and what kinds of projects they want to do, and then ask them how to get it done, right? So that whole reversal of the usual process is something that I think a lot of organizations here in the Twin Cities and around the world are starting to really insist upon, that and see the results of how much people can do, instead of thinking about this deficit frame that is often used on our communities. So thank you for bringing that forward. Patrice, you are next.
Hello. Oh, hi. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak, but I heard a lot of what I did want to say, and the most important words I heard was protection, number one, and also with the reverse process. In First of all, with dealing with youth, I think that we should take control and set what are the parameters that a reporter or someone who wants information from us, how they can obtain this information. I think it's very important that we keep the control so that we're protecting our youth and they're able to state what they want to say in the manner that they want the message to come across and not be bamboozled or taken off guard. So I think one first point is that we keep control. Absolutely, with what I heard with dignity, yes, usually the person who needs the help are the most knowledgeable about what it is they need and how they need it and what's the best way to receive it. So the reverse process that is being talked about, that is not something new. That's something that's been done in other countries, but normally, I don't want to say normally, but we've had paternalistic or northern countries want to always put their ideologies on the group that's receiving the aid. So I think that is all important. So you did say it, but I want to be sure that we take control and we set the parameters. And even before anyone else comes in to videotape or to record what is being said, because now it's in vogue for inclusivity, that we let them know these are the rules because we protect our youth. So you want to speak to them, fine, we can do it, but here is the space, this is how you're going to do it, and these are the rules. And we can even tell them, send us the questions prior. It's not their control. So once you take control, it's harder for someone to take it away from you. And thank you, it's been great.
Thank you, Patrice, for being here. And I'm so excited because I'm literally here at the Humphrey School. I am the only person in the building on a Friday during a pandemic, but I am very heartened that we are having this conversation today, and also that Patrice, who is going to be one of the postdocs joining the Humphrey School in the fall, is joining us for this conversation from Florida. Wonderful. I am looking in the chat. I'm not seeing any more words of wisdom being offered here. So I'm gonna re-up that request, that words of wisdom flow. But I do have another question for our panelists. You know, as we think about coming out of, fingers crossed, the pandemic, and particularly for those of you who are going to be approaching a new school year in September, and some of you who did go back to sort of a hybrid schedule or a modified schedule, as you think about going back into your schools after having had this experience, what is going to be one thing that you would want to share either with a peer or a teacher about your experience in this work that you think could maybe make a difference in your school situation?
I would share the projects we did. I think specifically Rebecca and myself's project is something that can be used in school for conversation, even a lesson learned. I think also even Renee's book, Naomi and Lydia's project, I feel like it can all be used, to be honest. It's a matter of, are they gonna do it at my school specifically?
And to kind of go into what Nia said is, providing the information to them and letting them know that it is there and it is accessible, and they just have to put forth effort to access that information and really try and reach out to their students and their staff members and bring that the breach that is between their staff members and the students together, to make the environment a better place. So yeah, I think it's really just reaching the gap and making sure they are connecting. The information that we can bring is being connected to them.
I'd say for me, whoever I'm having a conversation with, I'm trying to see how I can use you as a resource. What knowledge do you have? What experience do you have that we can somehow implement into our work? So I think having that involvement and engagement with whoever I come across would definitely be impactful.
I would piggyback on what Patrice was mentioning earlier when she was speaking about protection. Um, we have in our program a lot of students that are attending predominantly white institutions, and there has been a lot of bullying around the pandemic and the civic unrest. And so we really need to focus on protecting and creating safe spaces for our young Black students as they're returning to school, because I am hearing across the board that folks don't want to go back to the same schools that they left.
And that is not limited to our African and African American students. We're also hearing this from our students of Asian descent during the pandemic, and since even some of our international students who are wondering about the violence that has faced people of Asian descent as well, in association with blaming for the pandemic, right? So the pandemic has no ethnicity or nation, but the framing that has happened, particularly in the United States, by certain media outlets and government officials, has made this a very big problem that we need to address. So thinking about schools and universities as sites where we're going to have to heal some of the consequences of the way the pandemic and its inequalities have emerged, and the kinds of violence that has emerged around that, is really crucial for all of us to be thinking about that.